All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being here with me today. I'm your host, Nolan. Lots to get into today, lots to cover. Just yesterday, Israel once again, for probably the 100th time so far, broke the ceasefire that was put in place by Donald Trump, brokered by the United States between Israel and Hamas. Their breaking of the ceasefire involved the killing of over 100 people, including 46 children. So we'll get into the war crimes that occurred yesterday. We'll also discuss the blatant disrespect that seems to be routine now and the dysfunction of the United States-Israeli relationship. So we'll discuss all of this today and more on the Quest for Clarity podcast.
Americanism, not globalism.
I am not a slave. I am a free citizen.
There should be no Federal Reserve system.
Only America first.
End all of these wars. America is trying to play empire. We want everything released, and you're actively covering it up. It's not America first to be pushing our influence in areas where it shouldn't be. We're run by people that don't understand what they're doing and don't understand the ramifications of the policies they're enacting. That's an incredibly dangerous situation. All right, everybody, before we begin, if you wouldn't mind going right down below this video and hitting like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate that. It helps me out a lot. Also, if you wouldn't mind going to my Instagram, X, and Spotify accounts and giving all of those a follow, I'd really appreciate that as well. But let's get right into the news of the day. Just yesterday, we had another big move out of Israel regarding the ceasefire. Israel accused Hamas of breaking the ceasefire and killing an Israeli soldier, which, for all we know, could be true, maybe a lie because they lied before. But for all we know, we're gonna go with that may be true. Hamas, or some militant group within Gaza, some militant in Gaza, shot and killed, allegedly, a Israeli soldier. And in response, Benjamin Netanyahu ordered what he called powerful strikes in response in Gaza. Those strikes went on all throughout the day. They called them precision strikes, but if you look at the videos or pictures, they were anything but precise. And if you look at the death toll, they were also anything but precise, because about half of those killed in these strikes were children, keeping up with the barbaric theme of this entire war. And the total numbers they're believed to be 104 people killed in all, and 46 of them were children. So Marjorie Taylor Greene correctly has called this out as war crimes, but the Trump administration seems to be taking a different tune, which is what else would we expect from the president of the United States than to be siding with Israel 100% of the time? So let's take a look at this antiwar.com article. This is regarding this incident yesterday. This is from Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. Israel declares Gaza ceasefire back on after it kills over 100 Palestinians, including 46 children. So just before we begin the article, just to have to note the brazenness in which they operate. These people in the Israeli government will blatantly break whatever obligations on their end of the ceasefire that there are, whether it be killing 100 people now overnight or not allowing food in or aid into the Gaza Strip, which was a specific part of their end of the deal. They'll do this repeatedly, and then after they're concluded with whatever operation they're doing, which breaks the ceasefire, they say, okay, ceasefire's back on. And then for some reason, we give them cover diplomatically every single time. It's a repeated thing, because once you let them do it over and over and over again, they notice there's a pattern of being allowed to do that, and they continue to do it. So we saw this example again yesterday when they, after killing 100 people, including 46 children, say, okay, ceasefire's back on. And now any potential retaliation that Hamas would ever do is now going to be a break of the ceasefire, because Israel just did their thing and then pulled back and said ceasefire's back on. Where do they get off? Who do these people think they are, actually? They didn't broker the ceasefire. The United States brokered the ceasefire and has put a lot of diplomatic capital on this thing succeeding. And here we have Israel blatantly and brazenly disobeying every obligation that they have. And then whenever they're done operating and however they operate, they back off and say it's back on. So it's just ridiculous as always. But let's get into the article. Quote, the Israeli military announced on Wednesday that it was re-implementing the ceasefire in Gaza after unleashing heavy airstrikes across the Strip that, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, killed at least 104 Palestinians, including 46 children and 20 women. The escalation came after Israel claimed that its troops in Rafah came under attack, which killed one Israeli soldier. Israel accused Hamas of being behind the attack, but according to Israeli media, the IDF doesn't know if the attack was approved by Hamas leadership or if it was carried out independently by a cell of Palestinian fighters isolated in the Israeli occupied area. Israel's Walla News reported that the attack started when Israeli troops were using heavy equipment in the area in a tunnel the militants were hiding and began to collapse. So, this is the reality on the ground in Gaza. Let's just go over the reality right now in Gaza. If you look at the landscape inside the Gaza Strip, it is entirely rubble. From as far as the eye can see, it is flattened. No, not a building standing. 86% of the buildings in Gaza have been destroyed, thanks to the Israeli military. So there's complete chaos in Gaza. You have militants from Palestinian Islamic Jihad, you have Hamas militants, you have different militant groups, and you have just random Palestinian civilians who have now picked up arms and are trying to retake parts of the Gaza Strip and restore order in however they see to the Gaza Strip, to whatever neighborhood they're operating from. So it's just complete chaos right now in Gaza. You have these different military groups setting up camp across the Strip, and you have the IDF basically looking at all of them as the same thing as Hamas operated. And in the midst of all this, you have families returning to their homes amidst all the chaos and the confusion and accidentally stepping across the yellow line that Israel sets and doesn't tell anyone where it is. And then once they cross the yellow line, say a family of 5 just gets shot out of nowhere because they crossed the invisible yellow line that Israel intentionally isn't letting them know where it is. Then they say they put up flags of every 200 meters, which of course isn't very helpful, especially when you can't even recognize your neighborhood. You can't recognize which house that is or which house that is because it's all flattened and gone. So it's very chaotic. It's very hectic. And there's just the ceasefire never even, if we're going to be honest, the ceasefire was never actually real. That if we're just going to be honest with it, because the ceasefire would require both sides to, cease fire. And the Israelis, for one, have not stopped ceasing fire. They've slowed up. They've not come anywhere near stopping. And this has been obvious because every single day, basically, of the ceasefire, we've had reports of the IDF soldiers shooting a family that crosses the yellow line. Or an IDF soldier now, or the IDF as a whole, launching bombing campaigns across Gaza that result in dozens of deaths. So amidst all this chaos, you don't really have a centralized organization in Gaza, and this is just the reality, that represents every faction, whether it be Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or any of these militant neighborhood groups. So you don't have one organization that represents all of them. So one organization can make a deal with the IDF and then spread the memo to their members, but these other groups don't have any way of being notified, so they're still, in their mind, at war with the IDF. So this is the situation that makes this very complicated to negotiate with all these different groups at once, because not all of them identify with Hamas. So Hamas right now is claiming that they had nothing to do with the shooting, and on some level, it is very possible that they didn't. And the IDF is saying that they don't know for sure, because Hamas is the one engaged in this ceasefire deal, so they could be telling their people could very well be standing down like they said they were, like they agreed to in the ceasefire. And then some militant group could take action into their own hands and do whatever they want because they're not held to the ceasefire deal in their mind. So this is the situation. It's not an Israeli-Palestinian ceasefire deal. It is an Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal, and a very flimsy one, because at the end of the day, this wasn't a peace deal. It was a ceasefire deal because none of the underlying fundamentals that caused this conflict to begin with were changed whatsoever. Now, the Trump administration did respond to this, and of course they allowed it because they're trying their absolute hardest to keep the ceasefire deal in place, even though it's never really been in place, because they want a broader peace, because the Trump administration is acknowledging that this is not good. This whole situation from October 7th to now is not good for the United States. It's not in our interest to continue funding this. And at the very least, they know that, but aren't willing to actually take the necessary steps to cut off the Israelis. So Trump responded to this, and of course, he was saying he's supportive of these strikes because they don't want to do anything. Basically, the dynamic right now is they want to keep the Israelis happy because they feel like that is the best chance they have of getting the Israelis to move along with this ceasefire deal. Because the problem right now is that the Israelis, from all parts of the political spectrum in Israel, but specifically the far-right Benjamin Netanyahu coalition, do not want to keep the ceasefire deal in place. Netanyahu's closest political allies, like Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, do not want this ceasefire at all. They are openly right now urging the Israeli settlers in the West Bank to expand settlements. There have been nonstop attacks in the West Bank of Palestinians as Israelis are slowly moving on the West Bank and will eventually, sometime soon, look to annex the West Bank as a whole and take complete control of it under Israeli rule. These figures also see the exact same fate in Gaza. They would like to annex Gaza. They've said this openly. And right now, Benjamin Netanyahu is weighing whether he's going to go with those voices in his government or he's going to maintain a good standing with the United States and Donald Trump, who don't want the Israelis to do that. So this is Donald Trump's response. We'll take a look here. This is an article from The Independent, and this was Donald Trump's response. He was okay with these Israeli strikes. Quote, Donald Trump has backed Israel's deadly strikes in Gaza overnight, saying that it has the right to hit back against Hamas. Palestinian health officials say the death toll from the strikes has soared to 104, and earlier tallies suggested dozens of children were among those killed. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said he had ordered the immediate powerful strikes after Hamas attacked Israeli forces in an area of the Strip under Israeli control. He said later on Wednesday that a fragile U.S.-brokered ceasefire, which came into effect on 10 October, has now resumed. Trump, who is in South Korea, insisted the ceasefire remained intact and that, quote, nothing is going to jeopardize it. He has repeatedly touted peace in the Middle East as one of his achievements during speeches in his tour of Asia. He defended Netanyahu's actions, saying, quote, they took out and killed an Israeli soldier, so the Israelis hit back and they should hit back. When that happens, they should hit back, he added. Trump warned, if Hamas does not behave, they will be terminated. So, and what's obviously, for all of us who've been paying attention to this, as we've all established by staking our positions in this conflict, as we have, when he says hit back, this is just this idea of defending themselves. Israel has the right to defend themselves. Yes, Israel and the people of Israel have a right to defend themselves when they are attacked. They don't have the right, though. That doesn't carry that they have the right to kill 46 children who did not do anything wrong. It doesn't carry that they get to kill 20 women who didn't do anything wrong. And for any men that didn't do anything wrong in the rest of that 104 tally, it doesn't carry. If we take the Israeli story here at 100% truthful, that a Hamas soldier or a Hamas militant or a group of Hamas militants killed an Israeli soldier, then that doesn't carry that Israel then has the right to take the lives of all the rest of those people. And this is the problem with this whole dynamic here. And this is part of the reason why I don't think this ceasefire in any reasonable sense is going to hold. It already hasn't held, but the reason I believe that it's going to kind of crash and burn here, as it already seems to be, is because the Israelis act with complete impunity. The Israelis, and this is largely the fault of America over generations, the Israelis feel completely allowed and completely okay with acting as recklessly as they want because they know America will take the diplomatic heat for it. Israel doesn't have to face the ramifications of their actions all across the region. And, of course, a classic example of this is what is going on right now. Israel, for the last 2 years, has engaged in the absolute destruction of Gaza and have done so largely, or just about entirely, if we're being completely honest, with American weapons. They've done so with American money, American weapons, American bombs, and with the diplomatic cover in the United Nations and elsewhere of the United States government. We veto every single resolution that denounces them in the United Nations, making us, along with Israel, a global pariah. They drag us down with them. And this is the problem. When the entire global community views what Israel is doing as a genocide or at the very least completely wrong and immoral, and they see that the United States government is facilitating this, is allowing this, and is completely okay with this, and is everyone in the government is signing their name next to it, then of course this drags us down to their level diplomatically. And this is where we come to and of course this is why the ceasefire is destined, in my opinion, to fail, because we don't at all appear to be a mediator in this. We appear to be completely favoring one side of the negotiations, and I don't even think the Trump administration would say that they aren't, because it's so obvious. We obviously favor the Israelis, because every time that Hamas may or may not have confirmed or not confirmed broken the ceasefire, we respond like we just did here, with, of course, the Israelis have the right to defend themselves. Marco Rubio on the Air Force One saying they didn't give up their right to self-defense. But when Israel goes ahead and bombs and kills 104 Palestinians, including 46 children, then we get fully behind that, we support that, and we actually encourage that, because Israel should respond with force, is what we say. So we don't at all appear to be unbiased here. We obviously have a bias towards the Israelis. And this brings me to J.D. Vance here. J.D. Vance, and just to set the stage here, J.D. Vance was in Israel last week as part of this carousel, this merry-go-round of American diplomats in Israel to put some subtle pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to hold up to his end of the deal, because they believe if an American is in Israel and is witnessing what's going on, they're less likely to act like they did here. And you'll notice it's the minute the Americans leave that they're okay to do this. We had Witkoff and Kushner in Israel like 2 weeks ago. Then we had Vance go there for a trip. Then we had Rubio over there for a trip. It was this roundabout of American diplomats for about a week in Israel in an effort to keep the peace. And you see the minute that Rubio's plane lifts off, essentially, the minute the wheels leave the tarmac, we have Israel announcing their biggest bombing campaign since the ceasefire began. So J.D. Vance, during his trip, we didn't get to cover this back when we were talking about his trip to Israel, but J.D. Vance, but it is relevant now. J.D. Vance was in Israel, and he was asked at a press conference whether or not Israel was a protectorate or a vassal of the United States. Take a look.
Israel is becoming some kind of vassal state or protectorate of the United States, not only advising it what to do, but also commanding what to do. Why do you both comment on that? And also another comment on, will you allow Prime Minister Turkish security personnel to get inside Gaza?
Well, I want to put it very clearly. 1 week they say that Israel controls the United States. A week later they say the United States controls Israel. This is hogwash. We have a partnership, an alliance of partners who share common values and common goals. We can have discussions, we can have disagreements here and there, but on the whole, I have to say that in the past year we've had agreement, not only on goals, but how to reach them, and I think we're pursuing them successfully. We've been able to do two things: put the knife at Hamas's throat. That was the military effort guided by Israel, and the other effort was to isolate Hamas in the Arab and Muslim world, which I think the president did brilliantly with his team. So those two things produced the hostages. Nobody believed we'd get them out.
I want to, guys, for a second. I want to address that. So, look, we don't want in Israel. We don't want a vassal state, and that's not what Israel is. We don't want a client state, and that's not what Israel is. We want a partnership. We want an ally here, and the president believes very strongly that if Israel honestly, with our Gulf Arab allies, can play a very positive leadership role in this region, to where, frankly, the United States can care less about the Middle East because our allies in the region are stepping up and taking control and taking ownership of their area of the world.
So J.D. Vance doesn't believe that Israel is a client state. He doesn't believe that they're a vassal state, when it's blatantly obvious that, of course, they're a client state. They completely rely on America for their existence, literally for their existence. This is insane. And Benjamin Netanyahu, just another example of brazen overconfidence, just complete, what the hubris on this guy is absolutely insane. And then we have J.D. Vance next to him, who just eats up his slop that Benjamin Netanyahu just threw at him. And what is this? We'll get to this in just a second, but this whole dynamic is all out of whack, where Benjamin Netanyahu is taking the lead in this question of, is Israel a protector of the United States? How about we ask the country that props up your entire defense what we think of that? But J.D. Vance now says they aren't a client state. We don't want them to be a client state. Is J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, not aware that we prop up the entire Iron Dome and their entire military? We give them $3.8 billion a year in a memorandum of understanding every single year, plus tens of billions of dollars more in cash and aid packages and weapons packages. Is he not aware of that? Is he not aware that America has bankrolled the entire war over the past 2 years? And is he not aware that we bombed Iran for Israel? Is he not aware that we protected them from drone strikes from the Houthis and from Hezbollah and from Iran because America props up the Iron Dome? Is he not aware of any of that? Because if you want to know the definition of a client state, it's one that relies on a bigger, more powerful state for its very existence. Israel is, if you look up in the dictionary, a client state, you see Israel on that page. This is a joke. We're told J.D. Vance is this realist on foreign policy. He's this non-interventionist, wants to get us out of the Middle. Don't worry, when he wins in 2028, he'll get us out of the Middle East and out of these entangling alliances. He says it here. He says our goal is to pass the Middle East, basically hand the keys to Israel so that we can pull out of the Middle East and he doesn't say we won't care, but he says that we can stop being in the Middle East. Okay. And you expect Israel to do what? Do its own thing and then we can pull out? Or you expect Israel to carry out America's interest in the Middle East? Because that's what J.D. Vance is implying, while at the same time saying they aren't a vessel for America's interests. So this is all out of whack. The truth of this relationship is, yes, they are a client state, and they are a very overconfident client state. They are a client state that has never been told no. They're a client state that feels like they can control and manipulate our politicians. And they are a client state that repeatedly disobeys the wishes of the bigger, more powerful state that props up their entire system. That's what J.D. Vance didn't acknowledge there. I don't know if he does it in his private time. I don't know if behind the scenes all these guys know that's the case, but I would hope they do, because they've been confronted with this reality over and over and over again, especially during the ceasefire, as Israel has repeatedly broken the ceasefire, and we just saw it again over the week, or just a couple days ago. So either J.D. Vance is out to lunch on foreign policy, or he is just lying here to be diplomatic in front of Netanyahu. But either way, the reality is the reality. You can't, as Ben Shapiro would say, facts don't care about Benjamin Netanyahu's feelings. And of course, it's funny to take a line from Ben Shapiro involving an Israel conversation. But that's just the case. Sorry. As much as Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want to hear it, that is the case. U.S. could pull funding tomorrow and their whole operation comes crashing down. The problem is the U.S. is never willing to put their foot down, including this administration, that has repeatedly allowed Netanyahu to just completely disrespect them, and they take it. And then we get one picture of him apologizing to Qatar in the Oval Office, and that feeds all the people on Twitter. That's the slop, that's the red meat to throw at everyone on Twitter and say that he's standing up for America's interests. He made Netanyahu apologize. He made him do the phone call in the Oval Office. When the minute it gets real again, and the minute we're actually dealing with real foreign policy that has tangible effects, they do whatever they want. And they say this. They openly say this. Just yesterday, we had Marco Rubio on Air Force One when he was asked about Netanyahu's comments, where Netanyahu said they don't have to ask America to bomb Gaza. Marco Rubio said, well, Israel didn't give up its right to self-defense or self-determination or whatever. Actually, by having your entire system propped up by America, you do to some degree lose out on some independence. You're not actually much of an independent country if you can't prop up your entire defense system. If you rely on America to just completely fuel and fund your entire adventurous foreign policy. If you're conducting a 7-front war with America's check, then yes, you do to some degree give up your independence and you're reliant on what America wants to do, because America could cut off the funding like that. The problem is America refuses to. That's the situation. That's the dynamic on the ground. And when you have a party like America that refuses to say no, then you get Netanyahu being as brazen as he is and is willing to say that no, America doesn't have any input in our foreign policy as he is. So that's the situation on the ground right now. And that's the fact. And it's just the fact that we never say no to Netanyahu. And that's how you get a situation like this. That's how you get situations where Israel's breaking the ceasefire and faces no repercussions. And that's how you get J.D. Vance in Israel saying, no, they're not a client state, even though that's in order to actually believe that. If J.D. Vance actually believes they're not a client state, he has no idea what he's talking about. So that's the situation right now in the Middle East. We had Israel break the ceasefire and then say the ceasefire is back on all before dinner time. So that's the situation right now. We'll be covering this more in the coming days and weeks as this ceasefire progresses, and we'll see what happens with it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to go down and subscribe and hit the like button below as well. Also, if you wouldn't mind going to my Instagram, X, and Spotify and following all those accounts over there, I'd really appreciate that too. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a good day.
Americanism, not globalism.
I am not a slave. I am a free citizen.
There should be no Federal Reserve system.
Only America first.